Today, we're going to talk about the male ego specifically and how your male ego is destroying your relationships or sabotaging your efforts and everything. Now, I say specifically male, and I'll get into why that is, but let me just illustrate a point real quick. I, my channel is mostly men in my audience who are looking to do better in a bunch of areas of their lives, particularly with women in relationships, right? And so I look at though what attracts the large amount of views and what hits YouTube algorithms with a channel like mine. If I were to talk about the female ego and female disillusionment, I would probably have a high number of views or higher for my channel and a bunch of dudes in the comment section cheering me on as I talked about the flaws of what women do and their ego protection and their arrogance and whatever, right? Or to talk about women in that way. But instead, today I'm going to focus on the male ego and how your male ego is actually harming you. That's going to get a lot less views. A lot of guys, not those of you who watch the stuff and learn from it, not those of you who I see kind of regularly, guys who show up who are really helping themselves, but the mass audience that make up of most of the clicks on any YouTube video, most of those guys aren't going to want to hear, how their ego is destroying them. That's not going to be something that they're going to be that interested in, which illustrates exactly what I'm talking about. Not even being able to face problems or things that you might be doing that might be wrong, that might be ineffective or less effective, that might be harming your ability for success. Not wanting to look at those things or have an educated discussion about those things is an ego protective measure. And rather, most guys, a lot of guys, it seems like at least internet guys, would rather cheer on, me taking down women and their problems. Right. So we're going to get into this topic today. And for those of you who are interested in actually learning something, I think you'll like it. All right. All right. We had a little bit of a snowstorm going on, which over here in the great northern states that I'm in, northern part of the United States, could mean that I get some reception issues. So hopefully that won't be what happens throughout the show. We seem to be doing okay now. So let's talk about ego and definitions first. All right. So what do I mean when we're talking about ego? So ego can mean a couple of things. In a psychoanalytical model, ego is basically your awareness of yourself, which is, important to understand, but not exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the harmful male ego, right? And I'll talk about why too. I'm specifically saying male because there's a reason why that is. The way the ego shows up for a man is different than a woman's, right? And it's important that you understand those differences so you can navigate, your relationships particularly, but other parts of your life. So now getting into ego, what I mean is I'm talking more about that inflated sense of pride or superiority or ability. Okay. So when I'm talking about like ego in this term, in what we're talking about here, the male ego is generally, it's a term to describe a general sense of men having a tendency to inflate their abilities and to inflate their level of importance in the world around them. Okay, so when society or the gynocentric social order criticizes men, criticizes the male ego and all that stuff, and when they're making critical attempts at taking down masculinity, they're usually talking about that inflated sense of importance that a lot of dudes will have, or that inflated sense of ability that a lot of guys will present, or inflated sense of self, right? We see that in discussions and studies on things like notch counts, where women tend to lie about their sexual exploits and try to reduce them, where men tend to inflate them. So a guy usually a guy can often report more exploits and experiences with women, where a woman will report less. Each one is protecting the ego in a certain way. But what dudes will tend to do is inflate. Okay, it's that in sense, it's that inflation of abilities. So we want to look, if we look at the most extreme version of this, one of the most extremes, we can look at narcissists, and we look at narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not somebody here who, some people that will make the claim that, well, you know, it's kind of a red pill thing. Let's say that men are narcissists and women are BPD, it's just only to different degrees. I don't think that's true. I think that's, it depends on what we mean by true. I don't go by that definition, because narcissism in the DSM, right, in psychology, is a disorder, and personality disorders follow a specific trend in behavior. And there's a certain block, and seems to be both genetic and as well as environmentally, epigenetically triggered, which means the environment triggers the genetic capability, and, or not say capability, but we'll say propensity to become something like a narcissist or antisocial or borderline. And what happens there is that in narcissism, clinical narcissism, they have a very polluted sense of self and in their way in the world. And so that's, anyone can have narcissistic traits, because there's a list of traits to include. People can have BPD traits too, but it's the degree of those traits in combination that makes for the disorder, or makes somebody, a person that we would consider a narcissist. All right. Somebody who is, and a narcissist generally, although they can often be successful and do well, they don't have an ability to have normal, healthy relationships with other people. So it hinders that. And they tend to, be a detriment to others around them, and society as a whole, rather than an asset. Okay. So having certain little traits from, you can't just look at traits and then say, well, yeah, every guy is narcissist, and, it's good to have some of these traits. But yeah, some of the traits, like a belief in yourself and your abilities, is good. It's when it becomes inflated, though, and you're not rooted into reality, and you're not, rooted into what the objective truth is, or how others see you socially. You're not really aware of, how others are perceiving you, or rather you are aware of it, and then you're trying to sway those opinions, rather than produce results. So I'm going to try to pretend I'm a doctor, a medical doctor or something, and try to sway everyone's opinion about that, and have some backstory about medical school, and develop this whole thing, right? Assuming somebody's, the person doing that is not a real medical doctor, versus actually doing the work and being a medical doctor. You see, that's where narcissists get in trouble, is that their delusions, everything is all about what others think. And, it's all a protection of that ego. And so narcissism is an extreme version of ego protection. And so it's a question of, like, so when we say in terms of ego in terms of sense of self, back to that definition, it's those with fragile egos, or fragile self-concept, fragile self-esteem, that have to overemphasize their abilities, or exaggerate their abilities, or their level of importance. So the narcissist has the fragilest, most sense of himself. There is no real sense of self or identity for a narcissist. That's a clinical narcissist. They're unaware really of a lot of parts of themselves. So what they're doing is they're creating a massive delusion, and they're trying to project that delusion out into the world, and they do it so confidently that people will often believe it. But it's really a delusional sense of who they are, not a real sense of who they are. When I say real, I mean rooted in objective reality, like the results they're getting in the world. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what we can see with narcissism, is that extreme sense of trying to create delusions all around them. But that said, every guy, including you listening to us, can have a tendency to do that. It's, narcissism, clinical narcissism, to be a narcissist would be an extreme version of that. But every dude in some area of your life, you've probably inflated yourself to protect your ego or your sense of self. It comes from weakness, not strength, because you're afraid to admit or display that you might not know something, that you might not be competent in something, or you might not be the best or be at a high level in a particular area. So you have ways of inflating it, or in telling a story to give yourself an excuse, or project out into the world that really your inherent ability and who you are is better than these results that the objective world is, showing. And so you're excusing that, or you're giving a story behind it, or you're just inflating it altogether, inflating those objective results. And that is a male trait. That is a traditionally, male thing to do. It's something we've evolved to do, and I'll get into how we evolved with that. But that tendency to do that is what's preventing you from having good relationships. It's what's preventing you from having, situations in your life where things are going well with women in your life, in your dating life, having a good sex life, having all the things that you want. It's preventing your success with other areas of your life too, more important, arguably, having that sense of purpose, having, good financial status and so forth. It's this ego protection that will prevent you from being that best version of you, because you won't objectively see your faults and your problems that you need to fix. You're going to inflate things for other people, and we'll get into how that goes. This is a good one. Thanks, man, for saying so. I appreciate it, bro. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Ring the bell and like the stream when you're at it. Z is not a plant. He just shows up every time I do a show. I appreciate it, man. So that was unscripted and also true. Another important thing too is that, I have groups of guys that are actioning results in their life, particularly with relationships, but also with mindset and with, even success and staying on their purpose and living a disciplined, purpose-filled life. And those guys are in my coaching groups, and I have links to that. Those are all in the description. But if, it's usually takes a financial and length of time commitment in an interview to get there. The interview is free though. So if you want to talk to me or one of my, probably one of my course administrators, to see if you're a good fit and maybe get some initial advice in your situation, and kind of lay out a pathway for you for success, whether that involves, one of my coaching groups or whether you have to do some more stuff before getting in, remains to be seen on that call. But that's a free call, so you can schedule that call. Links in the description there. And, if you're not really ready for that, that's okay. We got a free email list for you too. So I try to offer a lot of stuff for free. It is value marketing. In other words, demonstrating my value, giving you guys things that will help you, work for you. And then guys who are wanting to do better and in a good position to do better, usually, will pay for my services to do more. It's really the best win-win for everybody, because you get stuff, and then, it's proof of concept, and then people, a lot of you guys will hire me for stuff, which is how I can keep doing this. So appreciate that. But the likes, the subscribes, the super chats, I don't care about the money as much in the super chat, although it's nice and it's flattering, but it's really more to help those algorithms. YouTube's been a little bit more friendly to me lately. So maybe I should get my shit in gear. I'm going to try to post more, maybe more often, and some more shorts and stuff, and see how that goes, because my channel was dead for a while, but it seems to be kind of doing a little bit better. And that's because of your guys' efforts. And those are you guys who support the channel and do those little things. So I really do appreciate that. Now back to the topic here, the ego. This is kind of an in-depth topic. And if you're new here, this is a pod class, it's good to listen to live, of course, interact. But if you're listening to it later, you can do it while you're driving or doing some cleaning or organizing or whatever. It's to help enrich your life and spark some new ideas for you, give you some solutions. But it's a cerebral conversation. We're not here. Although I can be entertaining sometimes, I like to think so, but it's more educational. This is more to help you develop. And we're not having dumb binary internet conversations here. Those are the things that get the clicks. Those are the things that get the likes. Those get the views, because people don't want to use their brains. From the male side of it, it's kind of an ego protection. All right, back to ego. Not using your brain. When I say, I've commented on some other videos, it's, okay, don't be a stupid person. If you're a stupid person, this isn't the pod class for you. I'm not trying to insult anybody, but I'm trying to wake some people up. Those who are on the fringe, who are like, you know what? I kind of get caught into my assumptions. Maybe I'll listen to what this guy has to say and think about things a little bit, read some of the comments too, because my comments are really good. A lot of people put really useful comments in the comment section. I'm very proud of my audience for that, you guys. We have good discussions here is the point. And so opening yourself up to that, is a good thing, versus just reading a title and making an assumption and puking out your assumption and then moving on to the next thing that you can scroll on social media to keep yourself occupied and not actually develop or do anything. So anyways, it is, we have these higher level discussions here, and that's what it's all about. And I'm glad to have you here for them if you're wanting to have participate in it. So let's go back to now ego protection, because if you start to look at it, I try to it's fun to boil things down, although human behavior is complex. It's fun to have some guiding principles to help you understand your own behavior and the behavior of others. It helps you navigate your relationships better and everything else, and just kind of like the universal principle of female sexual selection, which short video went out on that. In fact, you might want to watch that after this. It's a great principle, because you understand why women are making decisions the way that they make them, which it's often sort of confusing. And it's not confusing, though, when guys are unconsciously incompetent, because they'll assume and think that they know why a girl's making a decision. And they'll have, whether it's platitudes that they've gotten from a manosphere or, red pill space, or whether it's some advice that they got at the bar, or just something that they got as they developed and grew. Guys think that they understand women, or they go, oh, well, you'll never understand women. Right. They either can never understand women, and women are this and that and blah, or, oh, I get it. I get how they are. And then they spit out like a general platitude to try to describe an individual's behavior. All of those things are ego protective measures. Instead of recognizing, I'm not sure why she's doing this. I got a couple of things that could be it. Let me dig a little more and see what's behind the behavior. What's her personality? What's her history? What is the situation empathetically? What is she thinking and feeling when she's, behaving this way? And look at all of the evidence available to see, to make a determination. Guys tend to want to just have an easy, quick answer, because the excuses we say, well, it's because you guys are lazy, like on the self-help space. I'm going to shame you now. I'm going to shame all you guys for being lazy, for not trying to learn more. But the reality is, a lot of you guys aren't lazy at all, because you'll put a lot of effort into things, but you're putting it into like the wrong things, and you're not getting the results. You're getting more and more frustrated. You know what I'm saying? And that is because of this ego protection. Being like, I'm not sure. Like, one of the most common things I say in coaching sessions before I give an assessment where a guy is like, holy crap, it's like you're there. It's like you're a fly on the wall. You know, you could lie, you could tell people you're a psychic and they'd believe you, like that sort of stuff. I'm not psychic, by the way. Yeah, I don't necessarily want to go down even the road of that discussion, but it's because I'm asking a lot of questions. When a guy comes out with, you know, a general thing about his personal situation. Now we're not talking about general female behavior, which general answers can, you know, support that. But we're talking about an individual situation. I'll be like, I'll ask a lot of questions instead of just being like, oh, she's doing this, bro, so you got to do this, you know, and just throwing out platitudes, you know, that we could have in Reddit discussions or whatever. Like, I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm trying to get into the motivation of the people involved and into and empathetically understand and look at all the as many variables as I can see to make a determination. You know, saying I don't know is one of the most important tools in your toolbox. Saying I'm not sure, let's look into that more. Doesn't mean you'll never know, right? But you're not a psychic, you know, and you're not going to assume that you have all the answers, and so you're going to dig into things more. That's what makes you smart, you know, more than an IQ or something like that. So when I talk about smart versus stupid, I'm talking about behavior and critical thinking and willful decisions, not necessarily what you're born with, you know. And so yeah, that's guy when I ask a lot of questions and then I nail it, and then the guy in a follow-up sessions with me and stuff, or in the coaching Zoom calls, are like, oh my god, that's exactly what happened, or what you said was going to happen is happening. Yeah, because I got a good assessment of what's going on, and I didn't just have, you know, these general things, you know what I mean. And so it is anyway. Got a little, oh hey, thanks man. Greg's, I rock. Thank you. You do too, bro. Thank you for the $10 super. You're the man. And good afternoon to you too, sir. Glad I could catch some during lunch. We'll watch later. Yeah. You have a great day too, Sarah. Thank you very much. Cool. Anyway, back to it. So yeah. How, let's see, you know, this ego, when you start to look at, just like kind of like when you understand a general principle, like the universal law of female mate selection, which is that cost benefit model. Again, watch the 10-minute video that just dropped yesterday. And I talked about it in longer streams. It makes sense. You know what I mean? It gives you like a model to look at and go, okay, this is it. It won't tell me exactly all the reasons for a behavior or what she's going to do next. You know, I still want to do some digging, but it gives me a good model to go, okay, like this makes sense while she's doing it. Here are some possibilities. It steers you in the right direction because it is a universal thing in how women are involved, you know, to do that cost benefit and to make sexual decisions based on a cost benefit and all those other principles like, you know, social proof and hypergamy and all those things, they fit into the model very well. For us, you know, the fact that we are designed to inflate or protect our egos, I'll say inflate. I'll just say protect our true sense of our own abilities and our own limits. The fact that we are, as men, don't want to face that. It's a general thing. And we do things to delude ourselves, to be delusional to ourselves. And we do it to, you know, demonstrate or project out into the world something maybe different than who we are. We tend to do this through inflating or through avoidance. That is a universal male thing. All right. So that is something, it's not necessarily a mate selecting thing, although it plays a role in mate selecting, but it is a universal thing, which means that, okay, when something tends to happen on a large scale with the species, right? Like our human species, or male or female, and it tends to, you know, cross cultural lines, meaning people in other countries, people from other backgrounds, so on, have these tendencies, and it shows up maybe in different ways based on traditions and cultures and upbringing, but these things are like showing up kind of universally. That tells us that there is an evolutionary theory behind it. In other words, there's some reason that is stating that as the animal part of us as human beings evolved this way. So as men, we ego protect. It's part of who we are. It's something we evolved with. Now, if we don't know this and accept it and understand it and learn how to use it in a way that's effective, and learn how to handle it so it doesn't, prevent us from getting what we want, doing what we want, well, then we're going to go around and be unaware and have bad results. All right. And so I could give a commercial for this stuff. It's kombucha. It's good. I don't drink alcohol anymore. So I drink kombucha. Not that I drink alcohol too much on my show, but you know what I mean. And so I got into all of these. My girl introduced me to all kinds of nice little fruit-free drinks like kombucha, but it's really good. You should try it sometime. They should sponsor me. I'll drink one every day on the show. So, yeah, so ego protecting. It's a universal thing that we do as men. And you can see it now, like when you put things in that context, it's like, oh, okay. This makes sense why guys do a lot of things that they do, and why guys can be controlled by the social narrative, so easily controlled because of ego protection and your ego and having a fragile ego. You know what I mean? And so let's look at, why is this an evolutionary thing? Like, why does this show up to begin with? Well, I'm not 100% sure, but here's what makes sense to me. Okay. When we understand like evolutionary theory and how human beings evolved from, tribes and nomadic hunter-gatherers into, agricultural city-state models into what we have today. So being around for most of our history in these smaller tribes, couple things. First of all, you guys that are listening all want to have maximum success. What's nice about how we've evolved as a species today is that people want to self-actualize and they want to get the most out of things and the most out of their life. Now that inflates itself a little bit in social media, but the reason that's there is because we have different standards. Like average guy today with a social media account on my Twitter or my Instagram, he may not have a lot of awareness of how to get there or what's actually important. However, his sense of what it means to have a good life and what he wants out of his relationships, his financial situation, and so on and so forth is way, like, for most guys above, you know what I mean? Guys who are actually plugged in and trying to do it. It's way above, let's say, what it would have been in the Industrial Revolution or something. You know what I mean? Like 1920s or something like that, or the 1800s. What guys want now is and what women want is very, very inflated in some ways, in a bad way. But the good side of that is that, our standards are higher. And we also live a lot longer. I mean, we live the longest that we've ever lived in our history, this today, old age. I mean, most of us are going to live into, a lot of us are going to live into our 80s, into our 90s. There was a very rare occurrence, 150 years ago and even before that. I mean, people had the capabilities of living, into old age, but people didn't back in the most of our history. Most of our history, people died young. They died as infants. All right. So that was most of the things happened because of the infant death before 5 years old. But then after that, though, people were dying younger from disease, from accidents, from war. You could get, if you got an infection before penicillin, it could be a death sentence for you. It can be disabling for months even. And so the fact that you can go to the doctors and get a Z-Pack and kill out whatever's going on when you get that, that cold or flu bug, whatever. I know flu is a virus. Let's not get in the weeds, but you know what I mean? when that virus turns infectional and you go and you get that Z-Pack and then you feel better in 5 days, that could have been a death sentence for you, right? Hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So my point in that, and I've made this point before, is that we're not here, like from an evolutionary perspective, we're not designed to thrive and succeed and maximize ourselves. That's not how our brains and bodies are designed. Our brains and bodies are designed for survival, which means less risk and going towards homeostasis or comfort, you know? And so, and we evolved for survival because death could have been much more imminent in most of our history. Most of you guys listening to me are doing it pretty safely compared to, our evolutionary past. And so that lack of safety meant that we evolved for quick, easy solutions to things that don't have to be correct objectively, don't have to be true, but this just help us survive. And that way we can procreate. For those of us who were able to mate, which is only 40% of you, all right, back in our history, you weren't trying to self-actualize. You weren't trying to be better necessarily. You were just surviving and doing what was most pragmatic and right in front of you, and then giving reasons for that, maybe as much best as you can. But most people, were just making it, just surviving. And we could look at even our grandparents and generational differences of even people today who are literally just surviving, right? There's people in poverty, people born in other circumstances that are just surviving, and there may be some self-actualization that comes out of that. But, the idea of having a certain lifestyle, that gets presented on the internet for most people in the world, it's just not even a reality. And so understanding that, it makes sense why men who we're the doers, all right, we are evolved, like, because men generally were the ones to get the resources and protect the tribe, why we might tell stories to ourselves to inflate ourselves, right? So if we look at alpha beta as a concept anyway, you had those, we could say the alpha males of the tribe. Those are the doers, the guys with superior genetics, for whatever reason, just got better results when they did things and competed with the other men in their tribe, whether it's competing through games or competing through who could do better on a hunt or whatever, or who could procure more resources. In that competition, the guys who are genetically superior generally just did, and then learn to justify or have their reasons for that. And that made up your alpha males, quote unquote. Okay. Everybody else, which would be most of the guys, the rest of the males, and a lot of those males, more of those males procreated than the doers. Not the doers had tons of sexual options, but there were less of them. You know what I mean? They're less percentage. What's the percentage of, we could say, doers or alphas? I don't know. We could say 20%, but it's probably even less than that. And so, but 40% made it. So a lot of the guys who are not the doers, they were doing things, of course, but they were not, those guys had to figure out a way to compete in the sexual marketplace and the social environment, and even to boost up their own confidence to be able to go out and, let's say, go into battle or whatever, and knowing that they're not the toughest guy going into battle, they're not the most competent hunter getting out there, right? And so there's an element of learning and self-improvement for men that comes a little easier, I feel like, than for a lot of women. Not that women can't self-improve, but it just tends to come a little bit easier for us. The self-improvement journey. It's a lot more self-improvement groups and things for dudes than women. Women tend to get into things like horoscopes, right? Or things, even church and spirituality, different things that will, give them reasons to justify where they're at versus action plans and skill sets to, to do better. And not to shit on women, it's just the truth. And so again, this has to do with evolutionary development, women being more socially aware, as well as having to develop social skills more to manage the social environment back in the tribe, and men having to go out and do, right? Produce. And so because of men having to produce, most men were not the top producers, right? Or the top doers, right? The top protectors, whatever you want to be, insert what doing means. And so the rest had to come up with some sort of protective measure so that they didn't become ostracized from society, so that they didn't become, that sort of incel, if you will, that gets dejected from the tribe. What do they call that? Omega male, something, whatever, if you're following that whole thing. So there's people that would get, if you were not a producer as a male, you were, guys would self-select, take themselves out. That was it still today is a part of our evolutionary, system for men to do that more often than women, because we don't carry babies. So we have to find value elsewhere. And guys who can't find that value have to do something to pick themselves up and be perceived as having the value, so they don't get ostracized from society, so they don't end up falling to low self-esteem and low, just a depressive state, and then doing even less, accomplishing even less, and potentially not surviving, or potentially getting in a state where they have to self-select so that the resources consolidate for the tribe or whatever, you know what I mean, to not be a drain on society. They have to, we had to, as men, most of us had to come up with some sort of self-protective measure. And the doers, okay, we'll say the alpha superior, genetically superior guys, they would have to come up with their own ways of protecting themselves too, mentally, because they probably got a lot of, and when we see it today, they get a lot of flack from the guys who aren't doing, right? As an ego protective measure, guys will try to take down guys who are doing better. Guys, as a negative part of competition, if they think they can do it, whether it's through, physically taking somebody down themselves, or whether it's through, having social alliances, they'll come after people. And this is why men, like when men become very successful, what do they get? A ton of haters. I have some haters, but I'm pretty, I'd say I'm not really that divisive, to be honest. And I still have haters, but you'll have haters because people want to take you down in order to have that part of, to win this sexual selective competition and the social competition, so in the, a guy who's a doer or an alpha has to learn how to navigate that. And so the navigation of that, in order to have this, the sense of self-esteem, self-worth, and be able to get up in the morning and do things, he has to ego protect too. And so this ego protective thing, this ego where the part of yourself where you question yourself, so you have to inflate yourself in order to function in the world. That's an evolutionary thing. That's a part of the male condition. All right. So now you might ask, if that's a part of the male condition, how did why is that just not helping us thrive? Because if you understand evolutionary theory, it's not designed for you to thrive. It's designed for the species to thrive and procreate, even if it's at your expense. Okay. And so for the greater, for example, a guy taking himself out of the gene pool, right? Self-selecting. We have more mechanisms in our brain to point us towards doing that than women do. We just do. Women are less likely to self-select than a man. We have more things in our brain that could trigger that self-selection, that evolutionary drive to self-select. And it's usually revolves around those things. It's a number of them, but revolve around feeling of low value and of having low mate value. So those two things. This is why the incel type populace is really, those guys are struggling really, really hard, because if you think you have no mate value, that's the biggest trigger for you to take yourself out of the gene pool. This is why after the divorce and takes the kids and leaves the guy with nothing in his 40s or 50s. And then the rest of society is saying, well, you're a washed up old man. You can't get a hot girl. You can't get a young girl or a girl to be happy with. You're washed up. That's all the middle-aged wall smash women telling, sending that message into society, right? That guy in his bubble of existence, even if he's the most accomplished guy in the world, wants to take himself out of the gene pool. Everyone who's listening to me, you've all been there. Everybody, all of you. That doesn't mean you've attempted it. Every guy at some point in his life, even if it's just in joke or jest, has that moment where he's like, dude, I'm going to myself. I don't want to say it and get YouTube in trouble. We get in trouble. I don't know what the rules are with that anymore. You get what I mean? Even if it's said in jest, guys have had that flash, that thought. It doesn't mean you act on it. It doesn't mean you're at risk. But that's a red pilling, if there ever is one, is that every man has had that thought, because it's a part of your evolutionary, tendency. That's not for you. That's for the thriving of society. Guys who don't produce, guys who are sucking down the resources in a tribal environment get ostracized or self-select, or self-select by proxy, meaning they run into battle. And look at the suicide bombers and stuff, right? That's a part of that. You know what I mean? And so the tendency to do that, to idealize something, to ego protect, and to put themselves there in that situation. And it's not for you. It's not to help you thrive, right? Your evolutionary imperative, what your brain does naturally, if you don't do anything else, is to point you towards just homeostasis and comfort and survival. Well, unless of course you're self-selecting, in which case, that's been triggered by a number of mechanisms. But those things, and the reason for that though, is because you weren't designed to live to 85 years old with a retirement plan back in those times. You were designed to be gone by 30, 35 years old, maybe, maybe by around 30, you died of tetanus or something. And that was it. And if you managed to procreate, have a couple kids, cool. The village took care of it. The tribe took care of it, whatever. And that's it, All right. So Dennis doesn't understand what self-selecting is. Self-selecting is offing yourself, taking yourself out of the gene pool. I don't want to use the S word as much because I think that YouTube doesn't like it and would algorithmically punish me or censor me if I use the word. But does that make sense? You're breathing and now you're not breathing because you did something to yourself. You get it? All right. So hopefully you understand now. Okay. And so at any rate, ego protection, right? It's a part of who we are as men. Women know it. And this is why they press that button all the time. All right. The gynocentric society, in order to control you, uses what I call the insecure button. The insecure button is the button that any woman can press at any time to get you to do whatever she wants. Right? You're setting a boundary. You're insecure. Beep. Oh, you think this about the dating market? You're this type of male. Oh, you're going to the gym. That's because you're insecure. All right. It's the insecure button that every girl likes to press because she knows that guys ego protect. It's a part of who men are. They don't maybe know it logically, but they innately understand that men protect their egos. And they do it through inflating. They do it through avoidance. They do it through, we all do it through a number of different things. And all they have to do is just point out that the reason you're ego protecting, or the reason you're doing something that may not be ego protecting at all, but you're doing something they don't like, is because secretly you're not that confident. Secretly, you're flawed. Secretly, what you're trying to hide from me and everybody else is that you have shortcomings. There's things inherently wrong with you. And so therefore you're setting this boundary or having this idea or reading that book or going to do that workout because you're insecure. Beep. And most guys, maybe not you listening, Okay, hopefully. But most guys out there, they listen to that, but they are controlled by that insecure button. Their wives just need to, oh, well, you're just not as capable. You're not as good. Well, you're just mad at me because you're insecure. And the guy will be like, I'm not insecure. And he'll get all butt hurt and lose it, which means he doesn't have frame at that point. And then he'll do whatever she wants because she pressed the insecure button. It works. Women press that button because it works. So the first reason, that a way that yeah, I'm sorry, look at this comment. Yeah. So no, yeah, this is not a positive thing in this case. The self selection is a term to meaning you're selecting yourself to be out of the gene pool. That's where that word is. But anyways, yeah. So I mean, this ego protection, first of all, in a large scale, allows you to be controlled. When you're going towards like, you know, masculine, we'll say cartoons of people and things that you need to be like as a man, in order to me to be masculine, I got to be like this cartoon character, this idol, Macho Man Randy Savage. That should be your idol. Whatever, like these archetypes. I got to be this manly man archetypes, or else I'm not good enough. That's all coming from ego protection and the markets and you know the large scale advertisers and marketing people that take your money to market to you guys as men. They use that your insecurities to do so. Even so, in the dating space, you know what I mean? Like, I talk about things how they really are, and a lot of you guys have insecurities. That's a real thing. And then maybe you hire me for some coaching. That's not me using it as a tool and per se. It's me talking about what's real. But you got like coaches out there and stuff who do nothing but try, and just YouTubers who try to stimulate your angst and anxiety in order to make you feel insecure so that you watch more of them versus solve your problems, or so that you spend a bunch of money, take their course or follow their coaching plan. That's a big one, by the way, with the traditional conservative marriage, promise keeper crowd, right? You got the biggest money makers in the course industry isn't like somebody on a Gumroad course or a pickup artist guy, or even a guy like myself. The biggest money makers are the guys in the traditional conservative promise keeper, be a good husband crowd. And they do it through shame. They shame you guys into, you're not good and you're not doing enough and you're lazy, you're this. That's why your wife doesn't want to fuck you. Like, and they don't say that. That's just my rendition of it. Your wife won't touch your pee-pee because of all the things that you should be ashamed of. Take my thing, go to my church, join my group, take my courses, my classes, and then go to my event where I'll have you put on a rucksack and low crawl while a couple of drill sergeants yell at you, and do that for 4 days so you can feel like you have a rite of passage. And, now you're going to just all of a sudden miraculously change all these things about yourself that makes you a gigantic pussy, like, right? And that's why you're failing as a husband. Be ashamed, right? All that shaming stuff, it works. And why does it work? Because of your ego. All they're doing is using your ego against you. Now, if it's pointing you towards doing better, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. A little bit of shame and a little bit of bullying, not to high degrees, but a little bit of that can be okay if it's pointing somebody towards being better. But a lot of times it's not. It's just taking your money and making you feel better. And then you go back to your miserable life and you find that nothing's really fixed itself 6 months to a year later. Or maybe you made a few changes, but they weren't that substantial, And so that's how people are using you, And so, I mean, even when like a company goes woke and goes feminist, whether it's Bud Light or Gillette back in the day, what happens? You got one set of the crowd. I mean, smart people like most of you listening know what's going on. and you behave accordingly. But you'll have some guys going, I'm not insecure about that. I'll still buy that product. I don't care if, trans person or this person, that person, which is fine. It's a fine answer, but it's like it forces people into some debate that it really doesn't exist. It's not a real debate. It's only just controlling your buying decisions. And now, of course, that was the idea, and it works for a little bit, and then it doesn't work, as we can see from Sports Illustrated firing all their staff finally, with their body positivity swimsuit models. You know what I mean? So go woke or go broke does definitely apply in a lot of places, but all that stuff is all bullshit. It's all just stimulating from the male side of it. It's stimulating your egos, or it's attacking your egos. And then you feel the need to defend or not defend or whatever. And all you're doing is, participating in this circus and this facade, and none of it's inherently changing any part of your life. Boy, did this get cerebral in this discussion. I got like 5 people listening now. They're like, what the fuck's he talking about? No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. There's quite a few more. But okay, so how does that practically show up though in your relationships and with women? Because that's the real topic, right? It shows up because all of that stuff, all that kayfabe, right? You get caught up in that, and all it does is allow you to you're using your evolutionary imperative to want to protect your social status and your appearance and protect your own self-esteem so you can get out there and try to do something in the world to survive. That gets used against you, and you guys let it happen because you're unaware. I say you guys, we've all done it. I mean, I'm sitting here aware of it, but there certainly can catch up to any of us. And the reason why, even if you're the most aware, you always can fall to, we'll say victim, to having your ego used against you. Always. The reason why is because it's inherent. So when you understand that, then you'll always be vigilant about this. Don't think, even if you watch this program and you understand it, you're like, yeah, man, I got it. Like, I'm good now. Your ego protecting right there. You're not good. Okay, you're not good ever. All right. What you are is vigilant so that your outcomes are good, because that ego will step in. You know what I mean? And we see it all over the place in the sexual marketplace, and it screws up guys' abilities to make real connections with women, seduce them, and have a great time. Have good dates, have good plate spinning experiences if that's what you want to do, have good marriages, have good girlfriends, whatever it may be. You guys don't, it hinders your ability to do that. And I'll show you how, like, we'll come up with some examples. All right. But just know that it's an evolutionary imperative. We'll say the true alpha males, again, I'll use the ego stuff to sway your opinion. The true alpha males aren't affected by this, whatever. But guys who are doers, right? Who do shit, who are busy doing shit and solving problems, they face their shortcomings every day, and they just get better and they do things, and they're primarily doing that. If you're that person, you're not ego protecting as much, and you're going to get better results. You're going to reduce your results or limit your results or completely hinder any kind of results you could get in life if your ego is stepping in. And that includes to shame yourself. That's also a protective measure. You're giving yourself, guys, for example, in the incel type crowd who, oh, you know what? I have all these women are A, B, and C and terrible, and I'm only a 4 in attractiveness. So I'll never have the girl I would ever want because my standards are so high too. So I'm going to sit here with no dates and go black pill and talk about women and trashy things and make a good part of my week in life talking about not getting laid and not doing anything about that to have good relationships or real relationships with people, because any of those efforts are futile and BS. And in fact, I'm hearing Paul right now. I'm going to jump on this comment section and say, hey, you're BS and you're bullshit and you're making promises to guys that aren't true because, you're saying that they can fix themselves. All this deterministic thinking is an ego protection. It's protecting a guy from putting in real effort towards success and then failing. But failure is the part of the process of success. If you're a 4 in attractiveness with not a lot of things going for yourself and your social skills suck, you're going to fail a lot. But if you're working on it and working through those failures, learning through it, learning those failures aren't real failures. You know what I mean? They're just short-term feedback, all right, that says that's not the way, let's fix things. You'll go through a constant process of fixing things, still failing, not getting the results you want because it's a combination of things you have to fix. And, when you could do better in one area and still fail, like you have to do better in a bunch of areas, and it has to be consistent and it has to grow in its effect. And then eventually it's like, boom, all of a sudden, it's like you crest that hill or whatever, or that you're coming out of that tunnel and the light on the tunnel opens up, and all of a sudden you have massive successes in areas. It's like you crested that hump. You did enough things that in the process of working on yourself, where all of a sudden results like start coming in. But you have to go through a period of sucking. You have to go through a period of difficulty. That is something guys' egos cannot handle sometimes. Well, I won't say they just won't handle it. So instead they protect themselves from it. So all this nihilistic thinking bullshit, that's all an ego protection. It's the same thing. You know what I mean? And so let's talk about those, most of you guys listening. If you are listening, you are one of those. Keep listening, because you don't have to do that anymore. And I have resources for you here, just even free ones on the email list, right? You don't have to be that guy who is ego protecting, getting 0 results and giving yourself all the excuses why. But most of you guys listening are getting some results. You just want better results. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how this ego thing shows up. So, cause you to lose frame. Kind of already mentioned that. So here's one way, is the shaming you into not setting any boundaries or standards at all. Right? Not having boundaries or standards of your own life, not being on your own mental point of origin, not being in your own frame. When you have an idea or thought or concern or way of doing things that doesn't fit the social narrative, or doesn't fit the narrative of your female partner or the girls you're dating or the girls you want to date, you guys will change that in a second. Not you guys, but a lot of guys will change that in a second, right? They won't stick to principles. They won't objectively look at things and go against messages from women and from social pressures. This is why social pressuring and feminism in our society uses this really well. Social pressuring you to be an enslaved man to a gynocentric imperative, pressuring from the marriage group for you to be, they say that the pro marriage group, not that marriage is bad or whatever, but I'm saying that group, you know what I mean, is shaming guys into being a better slave for a girl's goals, in which case she loses the attractiveness for you. And there's a number of reasons why that is, and ends up leaving you high and dry anyway. All that stuff comes from an ego protection. Shaming works because you're not sure of yourself. You don't have a sense of self that is strong, that you've developed on your own. So you're looking to society and other messages for permission to be who you are. You want social proof in terms of other people's opinions rather than results. So what a lot of guys do, it easily works. Being shamed into not saying certain things. You better not say that, you better not, whatever. And now some of that stuff can translate to financial difficulties in terms of canceling, right? Some of those things. So I understand why maybe a celebrity or a business person, even myself, I have to be careful about how I give messages. I don't want to get canceled. that would hinder my ability to help you guys. If I got completely canceled because it was off the rails, but I don't really want to be off the rails either. I want to touch people with my messages that are helpful and help people, do better. So like with that, it doesn't do me any good to get, blasted, canceled or whatever. It doesn't do me any good though either to appeal to the, we'll say, algorithmic sensibilities and mass opinion, though, just to get likes and views, because then I would violate my message. Some parts of my message isn't going to be happy or comfortable for a lot of people to hear. And so I can't, I have to stand my mental point of origin for how I do stuff, which means I'm not going to be as popular sometimes, but it does mean I will get messages and we'll get things out to people that count and who matter. I'm very full in my coaching programs because of that. I'd like to expand and get bigger and teach people how to do what I do and do a lot more things with it. All those things are on the table, but I'm not going to sacrifice my integrity to do it just to go with a larger narrative that's more socially acceptable. That would be me losing my own frame, right? And that's what a lot of you guys find yourself doing, and it happens in your relationships. You know what I mean? You find yourself losing your frame because you're looking for permission to exist. You're looking for permission to have an identity. And so women will hit that insecure button and get you to do what they want. Your wife will, shame you or be disappointed in you or reward you, tell you're a good boy. And she is literally having the frame, has the leadership, which is why she's not attracted to you. Okay. And you're not behaving like a doer. All right. That alpha male that does shit. You're behaving like someone who needs permission to do things. And that's the biggest reason that it shows up for a lot of guys, not guys on my channel. So most of you guys might know what I'm talking about, but it's not your life. But guys in general out there, that's what you're seeing, is guys are looking for permission to exist. They don't have a strong sense of self or identity. So their ego protection is being easily shamed. And boy, is that a big market out there to shame you guys for not making enough money, for not having enough pussy, for not, being whatever that, have enough status, have enough, having a bigger social media account, whatever it is, for shaming you guys. Usually it's success related or vagina related. You know what I mean? It's like, that is how the marketplace gets you to do stuff for them. That's how they enslave you. Guys are paying for programs because someone said you're not making enough money. Now, you might want to make more money. You might want to do that for you. That's fine. And taking a course to learn how to make more money is a good idea. But the tactic, though, is to shame you and to tell you that you're not enough. The guys nod their head and go, you're right, I'm not enough, because they're not solid inside themselves. You know what I mean? And it's like, maybe you're not enough because of what you're producing, what you're doing, and you need to do more. That's fine. But that's, nothing to be ashamed of. That's just simply a skill gap or an action, motivational gap. Maybe you just need to do more and do more of the right things and get better at it. Nothing to be ashamed of. It's just what it is. But if I wanted to market a certain way, and that's what guys do, that's exactly what they would do. You know what I mean? So that's how it works on a large scale. And then women control you in your relationships through that. You know what I mean? You're a good man. They set up the archetype. You're a good man, good husband. You're not being a good man, good boyfriend, good husband, and they manipulate you with these shaming tactics. And if they work only if you let them. If you're not strong inside of yourself and have a good awareness of who you are and a level of confidence in yourself, then this stuff works. If you're ego protecting by trying to prove to others that you're good enough, then the shaming stuff does work. You know what I mean? Those who are impervious to the shaming tactics are the ones who have a strong sense of self. And even if even if you make mistakes or have a shortcoming, being able to say, yeah, I'm just not that good at that right now, so it's something I need to improve on. What's wrong with saying that? Nothing, right? It takes away it takes away the ability for someone to shame you. Those of you guys who are a little bit too hyper focused on hypergamy and think you need to present yourself as something you're not and inflate who you are to your sexual partners, for example, because you're afraid of being discarded, you don't have a strong sense of self. That's why you're doing that. So your ego protection is to do that. And then sometimes that falls apart, flies in your face. And then when she finds out that you're not real, it wasn't what makes her attracted to you is your inner sense of confidence. Saying, hey, yeah, I don't know how to fucking do that. I'm not really sweet at that. Let me figure that out. Is more confident than pretending like you can do something and pretending to be competent where you're not in order to try to sway someone's opinion, you see. But guys do this a lot in their relationships in the dating market. They'll tell stories about themselves like, yeah, I'm really like this or that and the other. Read a couple of vignettes because I have like a bunch of things listed here. So read some different things, some little stories, because maybe you can see how the ego protection happens and really screws you up, right? So looking at my pictures here. All right, so here's a little complex, silly situation. All right, but these weird little situations and circumstances come up. And you're going to see in this little story that there's a ton of ego protecting happening. So this chick goes, my husband's 39. She's a 27-year-old woman. Okay. We'll let the people who want to rail against age gap, they can step in and say whatever. But anyway, she says, my husband threw me under the bus with his family and with his silence and had a complete lack of spine. How do I salvage this? So this isn't me necessarily giving her advice. I'm just going to be the analysis, though. I'm going to read it. It's pretty long, so I'm going to read different parts. She writes, my husband, Owen, and she says his name. It's funny. My husband and I have been trying for a baby for years with no luck. I would be happy to adopt, but his family is against it and influenced my husband to also be against it. After our second year of trying, I begged my husband to go with me to get a checkup to see if either one or the other of us was infertile. He was strongly opposed to this, as all of the men in his family are extremely fertile, but eventually gave in. And as it turns out, his sperm count is extremely low. He was heartbroken, and so was I. And we both got therapy. All right, so this is the beginning of the story. You can already see that this guy has no sense of self. He has no frame in his life. None. Because he doesn't have a sense of who he is. He doesn't have a sense of his own identity. And what that identity looks like outside of his family's opinion, outside of his wife's opinion, outside of society, everybody else's opinion. So his decisions and behavior is completely based off of protecting his own ego, his fragile ego at that. And when women talk about and shit all over men, talk about the male fragile ego and stuff, well, I hate to say it, they have grounds to say shit like that because it's true for most guys. And guys are blind to how it comes out, right? Or how it shows up. And a lot of women are not adequately explaining or demonstrating, they're putting up straw men and stuff. They're not showing how this male ego is showing up. And of course, there's no accountability on their side usually when they're saying things about men as a whole. So guys aren't going to listen to it, and that's fine. But there is truth to it because dudes have egos and they protect in terms of they self-protect and they protect themselves of who they are. You know what I mean? And so this guy has no frame in his life, no sense of identity. This is why in my seduction program, by the way, in order to seduce and get women, get dates and have the relationships you like and have sexual abundance in your life, all that stuff, I take guys from day 1 to a year in that program, and they are killing it usually by the end of a year. If not killing it, they're doing extremely, like a lot better than they were. We'll put it like that. And a lot better than most dudes. Okay. It depends on how far off they were when they started. But that being said, one of the modules that I talk about is identity. In my alpha mindset course, I have a whole module, entire, a module on identity and work to find out who you are. And I've talked about identity before. It's so important for having frame in your life. Without having a strong sense of, who you are, independent of other people's fucking stupid opinions, right? You can't assess objective results in your life. You can't take advice like you should. You can't see reality for what it is. It's all being filtered from protecting yourself and your self-esteem. It's the fragile self-esteem that women critique when they talk about the male ego and all that stuff. And they, are using it to shame men and all that, right? And insecure men. And, the male ego is so fragile. They're right for a lot of guys. For most guys, they're right. That's correct. Sorry to agree with maybe some of the feminist shaming tactics, but it's true. And if you don't recognize that it's true and that that there is an evolutionary imperative to do this, you won't fix it. You'll follow the script like this guy. And so anyways, he's already fucked because he can see the ego protection, won't stand. Like, does he even want a kid? Maybe he doesn't even want a kid. Maybe he's following her frame. You know what I mean? And she's 27, he's 39. So he thinks he needs to impress her. Like, you don't need to do anything. You need to find out what you want and then work that out with other people in your life. Okay. But he has none of that. And his family didn't want him to adopt. And then he's saying, well, I don't need to go to the doctors. You know how many guys past the age of 40 won't get their testosterone checked, won't get their blood checked? Why do you think that is? Ego protection. That's why. Guys who know they might have low T, guys who know that they might be vitamin deficient, might be deficient in certain things. It's not expensive to do, but they don't do it because they want to protect themselves. They want to believe that they're healthy and okay when they're not. And so anyways, she continues with, after a year of no longer trying, I got pregnant, but I lost the baby and we were devastated. He blamed himself and proposed that we start the process of getting into a family planning center for a sperm donor, which I agreed to. He asked me to do that and to not tell either of our families about this or our friends. And I agreed because I would never want to emasculate him. With the help of our donor, I was able to successfully become pregnant, and we had our little girl last year. She is healthy and progressing amazingly, and thank God for every day I keep my promise of never telling everyone. However, Owen is struggling to connect with our little girl. So let's look at what is going on here. This guy didn't want to face that he had fertility issues. So he ego protected this so badly, didn't want to stand up to his family, didn't want to tell everybody else that didn't fit his point of origin and didn't support his success and efforts to go fuck themselves because he had no frame in his life. He is cucking himself. No offense to anybody who does the sperm donor thing. Okay, whatever. That's your choice. But if you do it, feel good about it, right? He does it and he's cucking himself. He's having trouble connecting with the daughter. He's telling her and him, he's lying. They're lying to everybody saying, oh, it's really our biological child, which I can understand that lie in a sense to not, I don't know. I could kind of understand some of that and wanting to keep private, but why wouldn't you just adopt then, right? Like adoption was on the table and his wife was cool with that. He didn't want to adopt, but it's not his kid. He's not his sperm anyway. It's not his genetics. So his ego protection was so great that he couldn't handle the idea of adopting a kid and letting everybody know, hey, it's not my genetic. This is not my genetic product, but it is my kid and I've adopted, right? Instead of doing that, his ego would not allow him to do that. So instead, they covertly go to a sperm donor, have her injected with somebody else's sperm, and now he's having his wife and himself, they're lying about it. And he's not connecting with the kid and all this because he has his own ego problems. You see what I'm saying? This is a guy where this is showing up in the relationship. And you see stuff like this all the time in different ways, not just with pregnancy issues, but all these things. So then she says, here's where the trouble begins. Last month, he went out of town with his brothers for a friend's bachelor party. While on the trip, he told his brothers about the infertility issues and that our baby wasn't biological. So he was drinking. He had this thing on his mind, right? Because he's not being truthful to himself or to the world. He's not operating on integrity for himself, So he spills it out to his brothers that, actually got a sperm donor, right? And so then, and anyway, that shouldn't be weighing on him like that if there wasn't an ego issue. So, I'm sorry, I'm finding the spot where I left off. So one of his brothers must have told his wife, who told my husband's mother. All right. I don't know why she would tell my husband's mother, except that whatever, she never liked me. Doesn't matter, because people gossip. That's why. So he spilled the beans. The brothers spilled the beans to their significant others because, they got to tell their wives everything because they probably have no frame in their lives either. Instead of being able to keep something private between, that's really none of the wife's fucking business, right? Nope, they're going to spill the beans, tell their wife everything. And then the wives, of course, don't keep their mouths shut. And then they gossip all around. So everybody knows now, right? Because everybody gossips because, none of these guys have frame in their life, which is pretty common. And they're all ego protecting, which is why they don't have frame. So then their mother came to our house and called me a lying whore and tried to get my husband to leave with her. So this woman is coming over and start, accusing her of being a whore, all this stuff, because the kid's not biologically his kid when they went to a sperm donor. Like, how did this story get corrupted? He just stood there silent. I told her it was Owen's decision and not to tell anyone. And he had asked me not to say anything. And she had accused him of being a liar and all this stuff. And just to paraphrase, her, because it's long. But so she gets in this big fight with a mom to the point where she's physically pushing her out the door. And, mom's asking for all of her stuff back that she gave the baby and, all this big scene. She's throwing it out, calling the kid a filthy bastard. So I wonder what nationality this chick is, the mother is. And the guy just stood there. He didn't say anything. He was silent. He didn't step in. He didn't do anything. He didn't stand up to his family, right? So he was trying to lie to his mom and lie to that this is biologically your kid and it's not really. I mean, you see how fucking crazy this is? This is just a bunch of drama and a bunch of BS, all because this dude doesn't have frame in his life, and having frame in his life means having good sense of self, good identity, and not doing things to protect your own little fragile ego. The way to not protect your little fragile ego is to not have a fragile ego. All right. To have a strong sense of self, a strong sense of who you are, what is objectively you objectively have to as value, your skills, talents, and abilities, and what you offer the world, knowing that objectively, knowing your objective results, knowing the value you have and increasing that value, and not just trying to inflate or ego protect or lie to everyone to try to make your value seem higher than it is. You know what I mean? Or to try to compete with people over nothing. And so at any rate, I'll find a place to start reading her thing. So I asked him why he was silent, and he said he wasn't raised to be disrespectful the way I was, and that his mother hadn't said anything that wasn't true, that she was just hurtful with what she said, the way she said it, and that we should let it go and wait for the mom to forgive him. So he takes the mom's side, basically. I told him I would never let it go, and his mother and anyone who agreed with her are not welcome in our home. Now she's the boss. You know what I mean? I'm not going to let it go, and they're not welcome in our home if they agree with her. This guy is sitting here just trying to please everybody and has no frame. Well, not really trying to please everybody, but really just in a little frustrated little state of weakness and trying to, protect his self-esteem and making a lot of bad decisions. He should keep his wife in line and he should keep his family in line. That's what a leader would do. All right. And so then this ends with her, getting angry, fighting. She ends up like leaving with the baby and all this stuff to go home to her parents. And like, this is big fight now. You know what I mean? And I'm going to do this. And now she's in charge. But of course, she's in charge because he's not, so I'm not faulting her for having to, be all of a sudden go all strong and independent on this guy. But he earned that. He deserved that, because if you don't have leadership in your relationship, the woman you're with will see that she has to fulfill the gaps that you are not fulfilling. If you show weakness, that's strength your woman has to now bring to the relationship, which she doesn't really want to do, and that makes her less attracted. So anyways, in that little scenario, you can just see the ego protection and where that happens. Whole thing could be avoided. Now here's another story, a little vignette. She writes, high libido females 21 and low libido male 22-year-old. How do you cope with it? So she writes, look at this. Let me check the chat real quick. Yeah, I know, right? Well, this is kind of like guys who push their wives into banging other dudes and getting cucked, right? It's like she was pushed into it, though, according to her story, at least. Now, she could always be lying, of course, but, we can only take it on face value. It's like she was willing to adopt, willing to keep trying, do whatever. He was the one who was embarrassed and said, let's go to a sperm donor. He pushed her into cucking that way, and essentially. And so it's like, yeah. But at any rate, so this little story, high libido female, low libido male. When that happens and there's not a chemical or, some sort of neurochemical or hormone or nutritional deficiency in the male, the female libido is not higher than the male's, period. All right. Because it's just science. It's not, there's a hormonal concoction that is related to sex drive. And female libido might be higher than the male's during certain times of the month or during certain periods, but it's not consistently higher. In other words, women can find themselves insatiably horny around ovulation for a few days, but by and large, though, the guy is, if he's got a healthy sex drive, like I said, if he's not physically impaired, the guy is usually wanting more frequency. And this is why usually the woman wants more, we'll say higher quality, which really means longer and better experiences, more intense experiences, and less frequent. But that allows them to have less sexual frequency when they're not feeling as horny, and allows them to have more intense experiences when they are. So that's what women tend to err towards, whereas men want frequency because they're waking up horny every single day. And so when we look at that, men and women are different in their natural libidos and sex drives. Individuals will vary, of course, but we're talking generalities. And so in general, though, we're talking in terms of frequency, especially, her libido is not really higher. There's something else wrong here. If it's not, like I said, hormonal or nutritional or something, it's probably in his psychology, and it's probably has to do with ego protecting. And so this will actually lead us into, before we close today's show, the most important and obvious ways this ego protection shows up, that every one of you are susceptible of having happen to you. Okay. And it's the biggest reason for the male side of the reasons why relationships fail. So most relationships fail, most marriages fail. And the reason for it, we know a lot of reasons on the woman's side and why woman is usually filing for divorce and all that. But the reason the male, it takes two to start a relationship. It also takes two to end it. And the male portion of that responsibility has to do with this ego protection. And it's related to this story as well. So you're getting into probably the most important thing to walk away with. So if you're sticking around for the next 5 minutes, you'll have that. Make sure you hit the like button too. That helps me. All right. So she says, hello, I'm seeking advice, maybe your tips and experience if you're in a relationship where your libidos don't match. I don't want to hear leave him because the sex is literally the only problematic part of the relationship. Everything else is great, and I don't want to be with this man. I do want to be with this man, long term. Um, we're together for almost 3 years, and since the beginning, we had sex only occasionally. At first, it was once per month, which was totally fine with me. I would want to have sex with him more often, but he's just not so keen on it. I've heard this story, by the way. I've had women in my own consults because their guys are not as sexually driven as they are, and they're wanting to know what to do about it. So this is real, a real thing. But last year, we had sex like 3 or 4 times all year. I'm still okay with it. I do love sex, but what I love even more is being close to him and emotionally intimate. Is in being emotionally intimate so much more important, but it hurts to be rejected, especially since when we have sex, it's great. I know he enjoys it too. We talked about it, and he just doesn't have the desire to do it more. But he still finds me attractive, enjoys sex, etc. When we talk about it, it usually ends with him apologizing and me saying it's okay, and I still love him. So what we have is a massive cope and a massive ego protection on the part of the male here. Now we can look through the lines and read through some of the lines here, right? Like, she's not really okay with it. She says she's okay with it. She's not. Once a month sex is considered, that is by definition a sexless marriage. So once a month sex is, I mean, if both people are legitimately say they're happy with it, I'm not one to judge. But if we're looking at it the way that male female drives worth in a healthy relationship, once a month sex is not enough. And so if the guy is the one who is not wanting to do it as much, what is wrong with him? And chances are there's something he's protecting. Now, one could say, well, maybe she's like this fat chick and she's not attractive. Well, then why is he with her? If he's not attracted to her, why is he with her? That right there is an ego protection. He doesn't believe he can find someone better. He's not willing to do the work to find someone better. He doesn't believe he has the skills, talents, and abilities to find someone better, even if he were to do the work. So he settles with someone he's not attracted to. That's if that's even the case. I'm not saying he's not attracted to her, but if that was the argument, that's an ego protection. Why are you with somebody you're not attracted to? Go be single, go date, right? Every guy can improve themselves enough to be able to go out and get girls and get dates and people they're attracted to. All right. Not every guy is going to get a top notch 10 out of 10 supermodel, but you're going to find a girl that you like that makes your dick hard and makes you happy, And if you don't, if the person you're with isn't that person, then go find someone else. Not if she can't be that person, find somebody else. That's an ego protection to settle like that anyway. But I don't even assume that that's the case. All right. I assume that he is attracted to her, but maybe he knows he's not her sexual best. Maybe he is worried about that. That's one of the biggest things for guys that I believe. It's not even something they're consciously aware of. A guy settles with a girl that he likes. He thinks in some ways, without admitting it, that she's better than he is. He thinks that she's had better sexual experiences in her past than what he can provide. So he avoids the issue. He certainly stays away from ideas or talks about notch counts. He certainly avoids ideas or talks about sex and anything sexual in her past or anything sexual that she likes or would want. And then he avoids having sex with her. He's probably into pornography and jerking off, probably jerking off to porn on a daily basis and screwing his girlfriend once a month. That's assuming he doesn't have. And the third thing is that he has a hormone or chemical problem. We'll get to that. But if he doesn't have that, and if he's attracted to her, why isn't he fucking her more? He's not fucking her more because he's probably escaping into something else. He is concerned about his performance. He's concerned about being enough. He's concerned, you know what I mean? This stress or anxiety that sex with his girlfriend brings him causes him to not want to do it if he's physically capable of doing it, right? So that is a massive ego protection, which, by the way, happens. It happens a lot more than what the internet talks about. Just because, at least anecdotally, I've seen that a number of times. Women talking about how their guys are not as sexually enthusiastic as they are. And so the opposite problem, most guys are looking at it like, well, how do I get my girl to be more sexually enthusiastic? And a lot of times what happens is the guy, instead of being the guy to ask that question, the guy resorts to being complacent in his relationship and complacent with his girl, and the sex slows down because of him. And that is a recipe to get your girl to fuck another dude, by the way, or whether she breaks up with you to do it, whatever it may be. Eventually, again, cost benefit, she sees it as a higher benefit to be with this guy. But if she realizes she can't change this part about him, what bargain is she going to make? The bargain that most women, at least a lot of women, make is stick around with the guy, let him pay the bills, and go find a guy to bang on the side that makes him horny. That's how, high percentage, right, of women cheating. This is how that stuff can happen a lot. All right. And it's all because he's protecting his ego. He's all because he won't admit that he's got an issue. And that leads to the third thing. If he's only banging his girl once a month and doesn't have sexual desire, doesn't have all this stuff, what is he doing? Like, what is he doing to solve that problem? First, let's ask, is he on a bunch of drugs? Is he on psychiatric medication? That would ruin his sex drive. If he's railing heroin every day or taking antidepressants, maybe he can't get it hard on. Maybe he can't get an erection. Well, then why aren't we doing something to solve that problem so that you can be more sexually active? That right there is already an ego protection. You know what I mean? I'm depressed, I need SSRIs. Oh, my dick doesn't work more than once a month. That's a problem that a guy with a healthy level of self-esteem and inner sense of self-confidence, any guy would solve that problem. It's our main imperative is to mate. This guy is reserved to not to do that, which leads to the most important and most serious way that you guys will kill your own lives with your own egos, and that's avoidance behaviors. Avoidance behaviors is the ultimate pussy ass move to shame you into doing better. I'll say it. But it is, though. It's a pussy ass move. It's weak. You're unwilling to face your shortcomings and unwilling to face reality, so you just avoid them. You see this when guys struggle through the dating process. They finally get a girlfriend, and then they get complacent. They stop courting her, stop dating her, stop trying to fuck her, stop trying to have adventures in the bedroom, stop trying to have experiences with her. They're just there, and it's just a boring ass relationship. They get put into a little schedule. They get put into, a status quo with no variety whatsoever. She gets bored very quickly. It's dull. She's just unhappy. And he's all, I love my wife, and will cry over it in counseling sessions to a therapist, to a preacher, or to someone at his church or whatever. You know what I mean? He'll do that. He'll fucking cry about how much he loves his wife, and he won't actually do anything about it. He won't take her on a fucking date. He won't say, here, I got your sizes, ordered you the sexy outfit, put it on, we're going out Friday. And then when she gives some excuses because she's not used to it, say, I don't care about those. I took care of that, got a babysitter, whatever. Friday night it is. And then he fucks her brains out later. Like, why doesn't he do that? He doesn't do it because he has no drive to do it. Well, the reason it's not there is because he is protecting his self-esteem. That if he pretends like it doesn't matter, he doesn't care, he's aloof. That works in the beginning, by the way, because of hypergamy. Girls think something's wrong with them. So the woman will be like, well, maybe I'm not attractive enough. Maybe something's wrong with me. So it keeps her trying to make things happen at first. And so it kind of rewards this complacent, dull, shitty behavior that so many guys do. And then what ends up happening is she finally gets frustrated and stops caring herself, and then starts looking at the big picture and realizing that his aloofness and his complacency isn't because he's an attractive alpha male. It's because he's a weak individual who's afraid to face his shortcomings. So he protects his ego. I'm only going to have sex with her once a month, and I'll jerk off in the shower the rest of the time because, I'm afraid I'm not going to be enough for her sexually. That's what's going on in the schemas that are operating in the background, his unconscious mind, his ego protection. He's not even aware of he won't be self-aware about it, because to be self-aware about it would also mean to face yourself and look in the mirror. And so that is how you guys will fuck yourselves. Most majority of guys will fuck yourselves. And if it's not this extreme scenario, it's with other things, you know? Well, I'm not going to look at my finances because that's painful. I won't clean my fucking house because, well, I don't feel like it. That shit's ego protecting behavior. You know what I mean? You don't feel like you're good enough to have these things or that you're competent or capable enough of having these things. So the neurochemical system doesn't reward fixing it and instead rewards avoiding it. And so when you get into hopelessness, when you get into depression, when you get into all these things, this is your ego rewarding avoidance behaviors most of the time. Okay, not every single case, right? But most of the time, that's what it is. And if you start looking at male behaviors and how you guys screw yourselves, it's because you guys are avoiding doing shit to be better because you're protecting yourself. Instead, I'll talk about it on the internet. Instead, I'll read this, this book that may be a great book, but then not do any action. Instead, I'll talk about how shitty women are out there. Instead, I'll talk about how I'm going to geomax someday and find some girl in Thailand or whatever. Instead, you know what I mean? Like there are all of these stories and these things that dudes tell themselves. All these dudes walking around are one big walking fucking bullshit story that they're just saying to everybody else and saying to themselves, so that they can feel good about themselves rather than face the fact that they have shortcomings and that objectively they need to do more things. But there's also objective value too. When you face yourself, you see the value that you have, the potential you have, and maybe the potential that you're wasting. And then you go out and you start facing your failures every fucking day. You go out and suck and then come back and go, damn, that sucked and was painful. How can I do better? So it sucks a little bit less tomorrow. And then you go back out and do it again. And eventually you start to feel good doing things like that. You start to feel good, like getting a little bit better, sucking a little bit less, getting a little bit better results when you face your problems. And it took me an hour and 30 minutes or so to get to that point, but that's the main point. Now we're finished reading this story, get to some questions. So we're not quite done, but that is the main point here, man. If anything else, there's other things too. I have other things in my notes. Just won't have time to get to, like, the not having accountability. That's an ego protection. Not being able to be wrong, not being able to apologize. That's an interesting manosphere thing. You know what I mean? I think it's a Trump thing. Kind of happened with Trump. But people don't realize, like, Trump, first of all, is a different animal. All right. Second of all, he is publicly not apologizing to people who are haters, which is totally fine. All right. I don't know what he does in his personal life. I don't know the man personally. But when you deal with someone personally, an appropriate apology, which is just an admittance of fault, showing remorse for any wrong that you've caused and demonstrating that you intend to do better, that's an appropriate way of apologizing. It's not the same as placating. It's not the same as simping, and it's not a weakness. It's actually a strength. A proper apology is a strong thing to do, not a weak thing. But somehow there's this myth that you can never apologize, that somehow, well, that is an ego protection. Oh, I can never apologize. Blah, blah, blah. I have to do some word salad and dance around it, or I'll lose frame with my girl. Fuck that. Just look at her and be like, hey, babe, I'm fucking sorry. I didn't mean to say it like that. Here's what it is instead, whatever. And then move on. That demonstrates strength. I know it's controversial for some of you guys, but that demonstrates strength. You know what I mean? And so it's the ego protection that causes that stuff. How about this? Trying to teach your girl, I'm going to teach her the right way and get her to, or trying to convince your girl with logic to see your point of view and to agree with you. And I'm not talking about just like in normal course of a conversation, but I'm talking about really having an investment in convincing her, or in an argument being mad at her and then wanting to beat her with logic. Well, I'm just going to out argue her with logic. You know what I mean? All that stuff is ego protective behavior because it won't get you what you want. It's poor game. It's poor communication with a woman, and it won't get her to see your side of things at all, and it won't really get her to take, to be on the same side of the table with you to create solutions to problems in your relationships, to be there with you as you lead through a better life together. That's those things don't get you that, the arguing with a woman thing, but you guys do it because of your egos. You're afraid I'll lose frame if I admit, if I let her think I'm wrong or whatever. Not really. Just don't be, if you're right and you're right, then behave that way and lead it properly with your actions and your words. But your words aren't trying to convince. Your words are stating the way it is, or they're listening and they're having compassion, and then their action plans. Like, that's what your words do when you have healthy self-esteem and you're not trying to prove yourself to anybody. You see what I mean? But that shows up in relationships. How about jealousy over other dudes or retroactive jealousy? Now, having a standard to protect your relationship, and having a standard because you respect yourself, and you expect, as a condition of your commitment, your girl to see you with respect and to treat you with respect. That's okay. In other words, boundaries with exes, shit like that. But some of you guys have retroactive jealousy and are consumed with jealousy, consumed with stuff. Now, there's a lot going on with that in terms of the instincts. And that's a total, I've talked about in other videos, topic for another day. But much of the reason why that plagues you is your own ego, because you can't face that a guy who's maybe a little bit taller than you, or had a little bit bigger dick than you, or had some things you can't fix or change, had something you didn't, right? You fucked your girl, right? And your ego can't handle it. Instead of saying, well, that's fine. If those things, there's some things that are objectively different or even objectively better, I'll just make myself better in other areas and then be better as a whole for myself. And she can either like it and be around, or if she doesn't, if she would rather have had somebody else in her past or a different guy, then she can go get kicked to the curb and I'll find another girl. That would be somebody with frame, and somebody with a strong sense of themselves would take it like that. Cool. You've been with, she's been with somebody who had A, B, and C trait better than you. Well, you have a whole bunch of things you can do that makes you not only better, but creating the better sexual experience. And if she doesn't think so, then it's not your fucking problem, is it? Fine. Got laid, don't care. Bye. See you later. Why am I a slave to some girl who racked up notches and had experiences and now she can't get out of it? Whatever. I'll pick a different girl now who will think differently. That doesn't mean I don't improve myself sexually and work on my own performance, but it means that, if a girl wants something else, and that's what she experienced, or that's what she thinks she wants, or that's her thing, go someplace else, right? That's what somebody with frame does. You guys get hung up on the girl and get polluted with retroactive jealousy and shortcomings. And then it creates all these behaviors, and it's all you protecting your ego, and you eat yourself alive with those things. How about the guys who have high standards, and their standards are so fucking high that they're not fucking anybody? They haven't had sex in 6 months, a year and a half. They don't have girlfriends. They're not dating because their standards are so high. That's a ridiculous ego protection. It would feel much better if they would just get out and date women and enjoy women for who they are, with the shortcomings and things that they have. And if the women that they're dating are not of the quality that they want, then they need to improve themselves, which means their game and their skills in seduction, as well as just their overall value, in order to meet better women. Like, that's what you do. But guys won't do that. Some guys will sit back and basically, I've seen really successful guys actually with a lot going for them, and they haven't had a woman in their life in years. And they have all kinds of bullshit stories that they tell themselves in the world to try to protect themselves from that. How about competing over nothing? Have you ever watched a guy playing a game of pool with a girl and he gets mad because he's losing? That's always fucking hilarious to me. It's like, what? Are you a pool shark, bro? were you playing for the championship the other day? Now you're getting beaten by a girl. Like you're gonna cry about it? Like no. Instead of laughing about it and recognizing that this chick's beating his ass and it's fine, he's got this massive ego to protect. Who cares if some girl beats you in pool, bro? Like doesn't make you lower mate value at all. You know what I mean? It really doesn't. Maybe she just happens to be really good at it. Maybe she learned from her dad, or maybe she's a drunk who spent a lot of time at bars playing pool. Who knows, right? But guys used to get, guys that get butthurt about shit like that, man. It's an ego protection. And a lot of guys are guilty. We're all guilty of doing something to ego protect, myself included. The second I think that I'm not susceptible to ego protection and, deluding myself is the second that will happen. All right. So when you recognize that this is a thing inside of you because you have a dick, all right, and it's part of your evolutionary protective system, then you'll fix it. You'll fix it. And you'll also look out for it and not become victim to it. So back to this little story here, she's talking about the sex and all this, She says, it's not a deal breaker for me, but the vision of living next decades with having sex few times per year is frustrating. I don't want to open the relationship, but I don't feel the need to have sex with someone else. I want it with him. I'm usually the one to initiate. So I tried to leave it to him until he's ready. It didn't work. And of course I never force him or push him. Sorry, I just switched over to the next page and I'm lost. Where did it go? Blah, blah. Of course, I would never, there you go, force him or push him to have sex or be mad about it. I just, I just want to know that he wants it. And then she's asking anybody with a similar problem. Anyways, that relationship is doomed. And that guy is ego protecting himself from facing his sexual shortcomings and sexual problems. This happens all the time in relationships. When girls complain, a girl's biggest complaint when they get into a relationship and a marriage is that it lost its spark. It became dull. He doesn't take me out anymore. He doesn't pay attention anymore. He doesn't do most guys that get into a relationship and they roll over, try to stick their dicks in their wives once or twice a month until she, tells them to stop more frequently. And then sex just kind of erodes away. And then the guy turns around going, whoa, why is my wife not want to have sex with me? She wants to sleep in the other room with the baby. What's going on? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, what are you doing? And so like for guys who end up in my programs to get their girls' wives to kind of make sex happen again, all that. A lot of those guys, it's like, I'll ask them, they'll have all of the things. They create the prison around themselves, right? Well, I got my job and she's got her job. And then we got the kids and we got to drive around extracurriculars. Like we got to do these things. And I got this thing and she's got this volunteer group. And every night we got something going on and blah, 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 blah. They just create the excuses and the prison. Men love to create the prison for them to live in. All right. This is an ego protection too, because they don't want to face the uncertainty out there, the uncertainty of the world. So they want the stability of the prison that they can create for themselves. And they do it with their stable marriages and stable jobs. And they create this little prison. And next thing you know, it's this dull prison that they live in where they're, and their wives are in charge a lot and all this. And what they've done to court their wives is roll over and try to fuck her. And so like the beginning of dread for my version of it, which is actually pretty similar, somewhat of some of the other versions too, but mine's a little more nuanced and more effective. Otherwise I wouldn't do a different version. But the beginning of it is simply a guy getting his goals and shit in order outside of the relationship, getting his physical health and attractiveness in order, and trying to date, court, and fuck his girl once a week. That's it. Like when the sex is dried up and she's out of frame and they're like living these separate lives, he starts off on a process of improving himself and his sexual market value. He gets back his own mental point of origin, which means he starts to get back without even trying the authority that he should have in that relationship. And then he just takes her out and tries to do something cool once a week where sex can happen, not roll over and try to throw his dick in her and on because it's Tuesday and damn it, Tuesdays are sex night. You know what I mean? Or whatever fucking weird thing they got going on. Weird shit that people in vanilla ass relationships do. I don't know. But, like instead, taking her out, having an experience that he should be enjoying as well as her enjoying it. You know what I mean? And creating that experience. And then, having sex be a part of that experience because you're a couple. Most of the time, I would say probably 75% of the time, when a guy's relationship's gotten dull and he wants to, do the dread thing and try to get things back in order, it doesn't get past phase one. Phase one is basically improving yourself and courting and fucking your wife once a week. Actually learning how to seduce, looking up how to get a little bit better at sex, looking up, or talking to me in a Zoom call and our coaching things, right? Getting better at seduction, getting better at having dates. But it isn't even like they need that much skill to develop. It's really just thinking about it and doing it. Guys, to ego protect, they've lost completely, you know what I mean? That sense of they think, oh, I'm secure in this relationship. I'm good. And they stopped courting their girls. They got complacent. They got lazy. Complacency and laziness is not because you guys are lazy. For those of you who have been guilty, it's because you're protecting your ego. When you guys are like, I don't have time to date. I don't have time to text girls. How much time are you spending texting girls? You know what? When I was single and dating, I didn't spend a lot of time. We set the date up. We went on the date. That's what happened. It's not a time investment. You're wasting and spending your time doing something else. You're ego protecting. And that's why you won't do the things to get you the results. And so when you look at things in terms of your ego and you look at things in terms of, is my sense of self and is my self-esteem strong and healthy and objective, or am I protecting myself from that objectivity? Am I trying to inflate myself to look better in front of others? Am I trying to follow a script or a program because I don't have frame in my life? Am I trying to get permission to be myself from my wife or my girlfriend or from other people around me, my mommy, and with the guy whose mom showed up at the house and was mad because he got a sperm donor, right? Like all this shit, it's guys who are not strong within themselves. And so they ego protect as a result. That's the biggest thing that dudes do. Girls know it. This is why it's the biggest shaming tactic and the biggest way to sway public opinion. And all they have to do is go against the grain or for the grain. And you guys follow right along. Hopefully not all of you listening to me now, but most of the guys out there. So you need to make yourself better, be a little different. Okay. Be different. That phase one of dread works so well because guys don't have to do any of the other shit. Usually he doesn't have to do anything intentional to make her question whether or not he's going to break up with her or not, or any of those things. The dread happens naturally, and the attraction happens naturally when he gets his frame back and gets his authority in his own life back. And starts making better decisions in the relationship just because of that, as a result, not even knowing any game whatsoever. And then just, taking it from dull everyday shit to let's court, let's do something. Let's take a trip. Let me do something fun. And not placating. I brought you flowers and not that there's anything wrong with flowers, but you know what I mean? Where you're just trying to I cleaned the kitchen and I did that project you asked for, and I brought you flowers because I think that's your love language. Now, do I get a blowy? All right, that's what a lot of these fucking guys are doing. And a lot of you dudes, unfortunately, hopefully not you listening right now, but somebody else listening is doing that too. And it's bullshit. You need to stop. It's all ego protection bullshit, and that's not even attractive. So when I say court your girl, I don't mean that. I don't mean do what you think she would like so she touches your pee-pee. All right. I mean actually fucking planning a date and doing some cool shit and being an attractive person. You're doing that. Well, why wouldn't that be your first answer? Why wouldn't you do that? And maybe it is your answer listening because you're smarter than that. But and you've listened to more things. You've educated yourself. But most guys out there, why isn't that the first thing they would do? That to me would seem obvious, wouldn't it? But it's not, because they're protecting their egos. They're protecting themselves and they're protecting their identity. And so they're looking towards all kinds of other things to give them permission to have a penis and to be a man. And it's absolute horseshit. So 2 hours. Hopefully you guys got something out of this. And I appreciate you listening. And the amount of listeners and viewers have gone up as I've talked, which means maybe you guys liked what we were doing. Hit that like button, throw a comment and tell me if you liked it, or a point of debate or discussion you can always put in there, or ideas for future shows. And don't forget about those links in the description for the email list for free and those coaching programs. Thanks again.